Hello and welcome. This is Direction Revitalization, how to prepare your building to be smart. My name is Kevin Wilhelm. I'm the country manager for Sharry, joined here by Renata Hartle from Colliers.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us today, Renata. It's an interesting subject, and I'm really excited to learn more about how, not just building new buildings to meet energy goals, but to revitalize existing buildings to make them smarter and also be more environmentally friendly. Could you tell me a little bit about your background and what you do for Colliers?
So I'm with Colliers since 2019, and my job is with primary focus on digitalizing real estate, helping landlords and occupiers to really put together the strategy of a smart workplace/smart building and just execute on it. So I'm kind of a project manager, but also an inspirator and putting things together for landlords and tenants.
That's great. So do you do existing buildings as well as new construction?
Yeah, actually, it's half-half, I would say, like very much spread between projects in development and projects that already exist and trying to help them be better and smarter.
Excellent. So I'll tell the audience a little something. And a long time ago, the first time I'd ever heard of a smart building or been introduced to a smart building, it was actually a project Renata was working on. So I live in Boston, and we had won a project in the Seaport District, and it was a really, really cool building with a lot of interesting technology. And we have our first meeting, and I'm a security guy, so I'm like, yeah, the door opens up, a lot of good stuff like that. And Renata was there with the owner talking about the vision for the building. And it was just one of those like wow moments. I mean, this was, 2016, 2017, and shame on me for not knowing, but the smart buildings weren't as prevalent or at least as aggressively marketed as they are now. And I just remember being in that meeting with you, Renata, and just like walking out of like, wow, this is like the future. Like this is all about like not just making a building better, but making how people move through the building, how people interact with the building. So I just got to say, like, you're definitely one of the most knowledgeable people in the industry when it comes to smart buildings. And I'm really excited that you decided to join us today.
Thank you. And I feel like, I have learned so much since then. Like, I remember when I started, I kind of tried to put together my own definition of smart building, because when I was Googling it, like I was seeing different ways of how different organizations define it. And I always felt like something's missing. And yeah, I was working on it very hard. And with every year, I was like adding something to that, which is awesome. That's why I love this job.
So kind of leading into that, I mean, what is a smart building?
So a smart building is a building that performs well and delivers an exceptional experience to its users. That's in a short definition of mine. It like expands as you dig in. So like it has different components and it has different levels of how deep you get. And I like to look at it from a matrix perspective. On one, we have functionalities of a building like services and community around it. Then physical functionalities like access to the building, parking, ventilation, heating, energy, lighting, everything that, really like are around systems of the building. And then workplace experience. So like how we're using desks, rooms, and so on. And on the other side of the matrix, you have components of systems. So it's hardware, everything that you touch, and like access control readers or panels for room booking, stuff like that. Systems that control it all. Interface, so what user can actually touch. Is it an app? Is it a software for an iPad when the reception guest arrives and check themselves in? And of course, data that comes from it. So it's pretty complex, but when you start mapping it and you see what type of hardware I have, what type of software, what type of interface I give to my users, and what type of data, then you can really look at the whole picture.
So I know that, and I hope I'm going to get this right, but you're the first Central European certified professional for SmartScore?
Yes.
So Smart Score is an organization that creates standards and different certification processes, right?
Yeah, the name of the organization, to be frank, is Wired Score, and
Ah,
that's
that's
what
right.
they started with. The first certification was Wired Score, which was really much focused and still is on digital connectivity of the building, making sure that there is an infrastructure and the building is future proof. So you can add IoT, you can add new technologies to the building. There's enough room that was designed in. And now in 2021, they released a new certification that's called Smart Score that really focuses on and outcomes of systems in the building.
Okay. So when you're talking about, outcomes of systems in the building, you're talking about both new and existing buildings and then also how people interact with them, correct?
Absolutely.
So
Actually,
what are
there
some
are
of
like
the
in the certification, sorry, like there is a two ways you can certify. Like you can certify buildings that are in development, which is pretty new in certification world. So even the building does not exist yet, it will be certified officially. But it has higher expectation towards this building. Like the certification has higher expectations, so it's more difficult to get points while your building is still in development. And the second certification is for occupied buildings, which is a little easier, but still challenging in my opinion.
So is now a good time to kind of, I know you presented or created some slides for us that talked about in particular the Smart Score certification process. Is now a good time for me to pull those up?
Absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to share with with everybody um, what the approach is, and I think like today we're talking about revitalization, and everyone talks about ESG, and my point is very strong. I love this quote from Carl: "The most sustainable buildings are the one that already exist." So let's really focus on them and make them even more sustainable and smarter so they can perform better and they can deliver exceptional experience. And if we're talking about the smart part, I wanted to share how smart score defines it. So the next slide please. that's that's the definition of smart score. It really focuses, as I said, on outcomes. So they define that the smart building is the building that delivers inspirational user experience, is sustainable and cost efficient, and is also future proof. So certification itself doesn't say like you need to have this type of readers or this type of sensors and so on, but you need to deliver the possibility for tenants to understand, for example, their energy consumption and their carbon footprint that comes from it and help them be better. So it really focuses on the digital components of the buildings, and it categorizes into two parts: user functionalities and technological foundations. And in total, it's 53 criterias in those categories.
Wow.
So I think it's really deep, you know? It's
Yeah. That doesn't
uh,
sound like it was an easy certification to get.
it's not, and I think it's really pushing uh, the border further. You know, for like it really inspires. I'm going through a certification process right now, and at first it kind of felt like, yeah, of course, we're doing it. Our building is smart. We're doing it, and then when you go deeper and deeper, it really inspires to do more. And I think as certification will evolve and it will add more criteria or different points of views to criteria that already exist, it will be even more. So when we look at this, for example, user functionality under category maintenance and operations, there is criteria building cleaning, which is very interesting in my
Like
perspective
the
because,
actual like cleaning of the building.
yeah, but certification talks like you should digitalize this process. Like it's an important process of the building and it should be digitalized. So you should have a digital form of schedules, how the cleaning will be delivered, and then the verification process. And extras, you should allow your tenants to be able to verify if the cleaning has happened and like, have access to this data live. And another
Oh.
thing, my new favorite one in sustainability, there's criteria 3.4 that's called waste reporting, and that's something I feel lots of buildings will be lacking.
Hmm. So, I apologize for not being the ESG expert, but I know different cities and different municipalities have certain energy standards and certain sustainability standards. Does Smart Score help people meet those goals just by the nature of when you make a smart building, you're going to make a greener and more energy efficient building?
Hmm. Additionally, what SmartCore is really pushing on is you should have a system to really monitor, so at least you know where you're at. And if you want to be exceptional, you should also benchmark your building towards others.
Hmm.
So if we're talking about energy reporting, it's like, do you have a system that really analyzes the consumption of the building? And then can you show it floor by floor? Can you show it tenant by tenant? Can you show it hour by hour? And can you show what does it really mean? Is the energy consumption coming from um, cooling the building, heating the building, small power, elevators? Like, where do you lose the energy? And that's, I
Hmm.
think, really like pushing the envelope. And like with
Definitely.
waste reporting, like of course, like buildings have some data on the waste they produce, but do they have a tenant by tenant? Do they know how many pounds is recycling, how many is bio? And this is very important for tenants from ESG perspective, because soon, especially in Europe, they will have to report this information. They will have to show
Wow.
their carbon footprint. And if they don't know how much waste they produce, they don't know what their carbon footprint is. So
No, that's very interesting. I didn't realize that Europe was getting that particular in terms of not just your energy usage, but your carbon footprint. Because I'm sure that takes into account not just your energy usage, but once again, where that energy is coming from, right? I mean, because
yeah,
it makes a big difference if you have solar panels on your roof and that's the only energy you're using, then you're doing phenomenally well in terms of being green and your carbon footprint. But if you're getting all of it from a coal burning power plant, your carbon footprint is probably a lot worse.
absolutely. And like, if you think about the company's carbon footprint, like you also need to know, for example, a carbon footprint that comes from commute of your employees. So do you know really if they came to the office today, or which mean of transportation they used? Did they come by bus? Did they come by car? Did they bike? And how can you make it better? How can you actually inspire people? So like, I think it all starts with data. If you don't know where you're at, you cannot improve yourself. What you measure, you can improve, you can manage. And there are lots of components that are not measured now, especially when we're talking about older buildings.
Interesting. No, and you're absolutely correct on the older buildings. I mean, we see it in construction all the time. Newer buildings are sometimes being held to permitting standards or newer standards that require them to meet a lot of these different criteria in terms of being a smart building, just because that's what the municipality is required of them. But we
Mhm.
don't frequently see that with existing buildings. There isn't the desire for municipalities to go back and tell every building in their city that they need to upgrade their energy efficiency in some
Mhm.
cases, because it's not the most politically attractive thing to go tell building owners they need to invest so much. But I mentioned it a little bit, but I think ESG is a huge part of this. So I was reading a study the other day about ESG in Bloomberg, and they valued the total industry for ESG at $40 trillion in terms of total investment. And in the last year alone, or end of last year alone, 2020 versus 2021, the investment into ESG went up $600 billion. So the total investment into ESG funds is $2.7 trillion, which is
Mhm.
just an incredible amount. And I mean, at least for me, and I assume it's the case for you, I'm seeing on the tenant demand side as well. A lot of tenants are moving towards a more hybrid model. And obviously, hybrid is a broad term, just like a smart building is a broad term. But I mean, if I had to boil it down, I mean, the things that I see for people when they're looking at the hybrid model is connectivity, the general technology of the space, the ease and speed of their collaboration, and their ability to invite people to the building. So I can say it's because at Sharry, it's something we track. We
Mhm.
saw a very strong correlation between people coming back to the office and people inviting guests.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, although we're having a great interaction online here right now, if you were an investor into Sharry and I really wanted to impress you with my super cool office, this is not my super cool office, but if I wanted to impress you with my very expensive, 50th floor office so you can invest millions of dollars in me, I don't want to do that over Zoom. I want you to come to my office and see, wow, they really have it together. So, it's interesting to see how Smart Score predates I mean, doesn't predate the hybrid model completely, but certainly predates some of it, but really predicted a lot of what we were going to see in terms of the demand for people returning to the workplace after working remotely and finding they could be productive remotely for such a long period of time.
Absolutely. What I would add to that is occupiers, tenants, they really want to understand the patterns and how office is really used. So any technology that can help them, then you can do it based on access, obviously, and you can also do it on other like occupancy sensors and stuff like that. But that's like very important piece of technology that I hear companies are asking for. So they can know how
So,
many times people come and how they want to use the office to take decisions for the future.
are you seeing any interest or demand in Smart Score as a way to increase the value of assets?
Yes. And I have heard already cases of buildings that were certified that they were valued by external assessors a bit higher. So, if you talk about the percentage, like a single digit percentage in the value of the building, you're talking already millions. So,
Wow.
yeah, I think like even from the governance part, Smart Score also shows you should have a smart building strategy, you should have cybersecurity policy, you should have data policy and data sharing policy. You should show how you're aggregating data, and that really means a lot, for investors, and like the sense of security and showing that everything that you're putting in the building is really thought through. So I absolutely see the correlation with the value of the asset.
No, that's a good point. You think about, and we showed how holistic the Smart Score process is. It's interesting to consider that, if you're evaluating a building either as a tenant or an investor looking to acquire a building, that the Smart Score really offers a lot in terms of if a building is Smart Score certified, I can know that, these, how many criteria were there? 50 something? I mean, 50 something criteria have all been reviewed and approved and met a certain standard. So, it's really interesting. I haven't thought of it as a way of not just improving the quality of the building, but improving the quality of the asset. And that's probably very helpful when you're talking about existing structures where, you're looking at a building that could be 20, 30 years old and you're wondering, how much am I going to need to invest in that building to get, the return I want out of it? If you have a Smart Score certification on a building, you
Yeah,
can
like
feel
imagine
certainly more confident.
Yeah, imagine you're an investor that buys like 20-something-year-old building. There's high chance you will have to refurbish it. You need to have some kind of guidelines of like what to put your money towards, and uh, like sustainable solutions like ventilation and like changing of lighting, like those are very important for work environment. And then what else? Should you change elevators? Should you change access system? Should you invest in parking? And I think Smart Score is a very good guideline or a roadmap of like how to do it best. But of course, there are other roadmaps. But thinking about doing it smart, it's definitely the direction, as everyone will require data. Even if we're not talking Smart Score, we're talking ESG. Like, you need to know what's going on in your building.
So you talked about, 20 years in, you're going to have to start looking at refurbishing a building. I've put a poll question up and I know the answer, but I'm just curious what people think the average age of an office building is in the US. I was actually a little surprised by it, to be honest with you. I mean, I see all the construction going on in New York and Boston and Chicago and probably around the globe too, but certainly in the US.
Think of, Chrysler Building, Empire State Building. Like, there's so many amazing old buildings that, they're iconic for the whole world. And like everywhere you go, like think of Chicago, when all those office buildings were developed. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I was in Chicago last week and I took the architectural boat tour, and they
Hmm.
really talk about, when each building was put in. You can start to see, I mean, not surprising, right? But you can really see the different architectural style based on the building age. And they're talking
Hmm.
about, the square footage and the size of some of these buildings. I mean,
Hmm.
there was a building there that took up an entire acre that it sat
Hmm.
on. And I mean, it must be so difficult to try to keep a building like that relevant, right?
Yeah.
It's a huge area. We've seen a flight to Class A, especially in the past few years, but it's definitely something that people are looking for is the quality of the building. So I've got some answers in here. It looks like most people think it's 53. It's not quite that old. The average age for all buildings in the United States is 53. So that includes your hospitals, your libraries, your schools, things of that nature. But for commercial real estate, the classic office building is 32 years old.
It's actually a bit younger than me. I'm surprised.
Same, same. Yeah. I turned 33 this year. So I'm basically, an out of date office building. I need to get smart square myself.
That's crazy.
So,
But
we talked a little bit about the greening of the process, right?
mhm,
And I wanted to throw out a few additional numbers for you, in particular in reference to the construction of a building, because we know that construction is not a very green process. No matter how green the building is when you make it the end of it. I think you gave me this quote, but I mean, the greenest building, the most sustainable building you have is the one that already exists. And I got some numbers here that I found once again from Bloomberg, but the construction sector as a total contributes to 23% of all air pollution, 50% of climatic change, 40% of drinking water pollution, and 50% of landfill waste worldwide. So, I mean, when we're talking about why this is a good strategy, it's not just about, improving the building, although that's a big part of it. When we're talking about Wired Square, when we're talking about what we can do is ways to improve existing buildings. We're looking at a holistic approach of what the construction process looks like versus the renovation process.
yeah, and like when you think about the building, like there are different components of the building that age faster and some age longer. So when you think of buildings in Manhattan that were designed to be actually factories and now they're office buildings, like I've been in a building that had those like uh, air tubes for mail, that you could put mail and it was just sucked
Oh,
in.
yeah.
I was so amazed with that, and it got me really thinking. The building kept it because everyone who came in, they were like, wow. So they decided to just leave it, even though they could use space for cabling. um, but when you think of those buildings, like um, facade uh, ages like the longest, yeah, or it should at least. And then when you think about components like elevators, like they age a little faster than a whole building structure. Then when we think about like technological solutions that you and I love doing and implement in buildings, like they age faster because you know, like even thinking of how often you need to update your app for the App Store because new versions of iOS are coming. Like, it needs to be updated all the time, almost, yeah. And no one
Yeah.
does this with an elevator system or with access control system. So we're talking about the piece that's like you need to keep working on it all the time and keep adding, keep growing, keep changing, keep with the newest technologies. And
No,
that's intense and
it's
it's amazing. But that's why it's so important when you're thinking about revitalization, making a building smart, that you prepare it for new technologies and that you actually like think of what's going to happen in 10 years and where I need to leave room in my building to add new things, and be also prepared that some people there are so many different people that use buildings. Will have people who are against using app to open the building, and there are people who are freaks about it and they never want to use plastic card. So you need to be able to deliver smart technology that covers it both and allows seamlessly manage access system to the building, managing everyone, yeah, and allowing slow transition. Then probably we'll add something new, maybe scanning our eye or whatever.
Well, I just want to bring this up real quick because I had a conversation with a counterpart of mine, Vlad, today. And we were talking a lot about, we put all these technologies in these buildings. And when you think about it, it's very much a capital expenditure. And it's
Mhm.
very important that people consider that it's great that you put all this technology in these buildings, but you have to understand there can be maintenance components to it as well. And I love this chart you had here where you talk about it being future proof and cost efficient.
Mhm.
And certainly a huge part of that is not, anyone can put the biggest and best TVs in, everyone can put the latest wireless access points in, that's just a capital expenditure, right? But understanding what you need to do to maintain those systems and support them. I mean, I see it all the time. I'm sure you do as well. So many buildings I walk into that were even new buildings have these great high end systems, and screens are damaged, things are misaligned, things are even dusty, right? If you think about a QR code, your QR code works great. It doesn't work so great when you have a ton of dust in front of it. So much of what I see is not just about the technology that's implemented, but the strategies behind it. And I really like that, with what you talked about today with Smart Score and kind of having that holistic approach, even including, once again, the cleaning staff, because it does matter and it does create a building that is that much better.
Yeah. And I think it's finding a balance between those components. Like some things you will make better. And like, for example, if you put lots of efforts in energy reporting or in managing ease of access to the building, and some you leave a little, like you make it more simple, that's fine too. Just like keeping it open so different parties can also integrate to that. And
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing because also smart score pushes for all the systems that you put in the buildings, like not all, but the ones that deliver experience to tenants. They push that functionalities are being open for integration with tenant systems. So if a tenant come with their own something that they can easily integrate, which also pushes, that everything we put in the building can be open to integrate with others and exchange data, which I believe will also push us towards smarter cities.
Hmm.
Because
No, that's great stuff.
like cities that want to, they have old buildings and they want to be more sustainable and they want to understand city carbon footprint. Like if buildings individually don't have this data, city cannot really deliver on their promise.
Hmm. No, that's very true. We hear talk about smart cities a lot, and a lot of those buildings in smart cities are not new buildings. And
Mhm.
it's important that people consider the strategies behind what it's going to take, because it's not realistic to tear down entire city blocks and replace with new
Mhm.
buildings, because then smart cities is not going to be a very smart city.
Yeah, and it would not be fair to the world to just steer
No,
everything,
exactly.
And, I live in Warsaw, and I think the beauty of the city is that you can see like post-communist buildings here, pre-Second World War, even some buildings from still like halls from bullets from Second World War, and
Wow.
then amazing new skyscrapers. And this mix, this balance of the city, it's what really the city is. And I hope that investors that come to Warsaw and they buy all their office buildings, they can invest in revitalization instead of just tearing those buildings down.
No, that's great. I think, we're coming up on time, and that's, an excellent thing to end on. I did want to open up to the chat, and if anyone have any questions for myself or Renata. I see Lukash. He says, Renata, what building is the smartest based on the ranking by Smart Score?
So there are 150 buildings undergoing certification right now around the world, and about 15, 16 are being certified already. So it's a very new thing. Maximum you can get is 100 points. So no one can be like real number one among those. But there are a few really cool examples. For example, there is a building in Germany that was certified platinum recently. It's called Hammers Brooklyn. And it's in Germany, not in New York. And it's pretty interesting building, taking consideration that it's a new building, but it's all built with materials that are pre-used. So components come from Milan, like the metal pieces that they put together to build the building. and they put lots of smart technology in it, and it's 100 out of 100. Very
Wow.
good inspiration. It's developed by Art Invest.
Hmm. But it's
And soon
not in
we'll be
Brooklyn.
able to share about the building in Warsaw that's extremely smart and it's platinum, but we're like week short.
Well,
But
that's
check
great.
my link and I'll for sure share the news when it's ready.
Awesome. Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat, so I think we're all set. I really appreciate your time, Renata.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really had fun talking with you. Uh, we have one more comment. The client I interact with and propose new systems must ask what other benefits will I get with this new system. The problem I find is that the most don't know what they want. Yeah, that's why I
Well,
always say, like, put a system in and start measuring so you will know how you use it so you can define more what you want in the future.
no, I think Renata, that's a great answer. I mean, the other thing I would add to it is always a function of understanding where a building is in the process too, and understanding what their goals are. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not going to go to a one-story low-rise in a suburb and have the same conversations with them about how to make their building smarter that I will a 30-story high-rise downtown. So, like anything else, it's about understanding what their goals are, then building a system around that. I mean, to bring it back to Smart Score, and when they talk about the goals, it's really understanding all the steps in the process to create a complete building and a complete experience. It's not just, I mean, obviously clients will definitely come and just say, I want a smart building. And maybe they'll point to another building that's nearby and say, my neighbor Joe over there, his elevator goes up and down 5 times faster than mine. I want something like that. It's like, well, that's not really a smart building. That's a particular feature. But it's really having conversations, understanding what the outcome is. Is the outcome that they just want to have some cool, flashy stuff so they can try to sell the building faster? That's great. You know, there's lots of cool stuff we can do. You can put digital signage in every corner of the building. But but usually it's more, once again, like defining what a smart building is with them and understanding what their outcome is. And usually and lately it's been how people interact with the building. So it's making sure that it's easy and flexible for people to come to work and people to, once again, invite guests. And I'd say those are the things that I see is we're transitioning to hybrid work. So we need to be working with our commercial real estate partners to make sure that their technology and their solutions are built around hybrid work.
Absolutely.
Oh, do we have one more question? I see someone else typing. I almost cut off the last question last time, but if this is just a goodbye, then well, I think that's it then. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, Renata.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.